Every year you look at somebody else's hydrangea, the one spilling over their fence in a mountain of flowers, twice the size of yours, and you wonder what they are doing that you are not. Some secret feed, some product, some trick. There is no secret feed. And here is the part that will reframe this whole video for you. Your hydrangea already wants to be that big. It is trying to be. Left to its own devices, a healthy hydrangea in a good spot grows larger and fuller every single year, on its own, without you doing anything clever. Getting a huge hydrangea is not really about making it grow. It is about not shrinking it, which is what most people are accidentally doing. That is the shift. Most people who cannot get a big hydrangea are not failing to feed it enough. They are doing one of a handful of things that quietly cut it back down every year, so it starts each spring from behind and never gets the chance to build. Their plant is not stuck because it lacks something. It is stuck because something keeps taking size away from it, and they have no idea what. So this video is about the real levers, the things that actually decide whether a hydrangea comes back bigger every year or stays the same modest bush forever. And I will tell you now, feeding it more is not the main one, even though that is where everybody reaches first. The biggest gains come from things that cost nothing at all. I am also going to be honest with you about the ceiling, because no video that respects you would skip it. A big part of how huge your hydrangea can ever get is decided by which of the 6 types you planted, and some of them will never be giants no matter what you do. I will show you which ones can genuinely get enormous, and which ones have a built-in size limit, so you are chasing something real instead of fighting a plant that was never going to be big. Get the levers right on a type that can grow, and the results compound. A hydrangea that is allowed to build on itself year after year does not just get a bit bigger. It gets dramatically bigger, because each year starts from everything it kept the year before. But first, you have to understand where huge actually comes from, because it is not made in a single season, and that changes everything about how you treat the plant. Here is the thing about size that changes how you treat the plant. A huge hydrangea is not the product of one good year. It is the product of several good years stacked on top of each other, and that is a completely different game from most of what you grow. Think about how a shrub gets big. It puts on a framework of woody stems one year. The next year, it keeps that framework and adds more on top, more height, more branches, more growing points. The year after, it keeps all of that and adds again. A mature hydrangea is years of accumulated structure, each season building on everything the plant managed to hold on to from the seasons before. The size is stored in the wood, which means anything that removes that stored structure sets the whole plant backward, not by a few weeks, but by whole years of growth. Cut a hydrangea hard, or let winter kill its stems, and you have not trimmed it. You have deleted the accumulated size it was standing on, and forced it to start rebuilding the framework from low down, using this year's energy just to get back to where it already was. That is why the plant that comes back huge every year, and the plant that stays small, are usually not being grown very differently in terms of feeding or watering. The difference is that one of them keeps what it builds and the other one loses it, every winter or every pruning, and starts over. So the whole strategy for a huge hydrangea comes down to a single principle: help the plant accumulate and stop it losing what it accumulated. Everything else is detail underneath that. The rest of this video is about the specific ways plants lose their size and how to stop each one, in rough order of how much damage they do. Number 1 is the one that undoes the most, and it is done on purpose by the gardener with good intentions. Number 1. Stop cutting off the very growth that makes it big. This is the mistake that shrinks more hydrangeas than everything else combined, and people do it deliberately, believing they are helping. Every autumn the plant looks a little untidy, the flowers have browned, the shape has sprawled, and the urge to clean it up is strong. So out come the shears, and the plant gets cut back for winter, tidied into a neat mound, put to bed. It feels responsible. It is, for a lot of hydrangeas, an act of accidental sabotage. Go back to the accumulation idea. On the two most common types of hydrangea, the big leaf mophead and the mountain type, next year's growth and next year's flowers are already sitting on the stems you are about to cut. These plants bloom on old wood, which means the buds for next season form in late summer, in August and September, on the current year's stems, and then wait there through winter. The University of Maryland puts a hard line on it. Prune an old wood hydrangea after the 1st of August, and you are cutting off next year's flowers. Cut it back in autumn to tidy it, and you remove not just the flowers, but the accumulated height and framework the plant spent all year building. Next spring it has to start again from lower down. So the plant that gets tidied every autumn is on a treadmill. It builds up over summer, gets cut back down in fall, rebuilds from a lower point next year, gets cut again. It can do that for a decade and never get any bigger, and the gardener concludes it is just a small variety, when in fact they have been resetting it every single year with their own hands. The rule for a big old wood hydrangea is close to doing nothing. Do not cut it back for size or tidiness at all. The only cuts worth making are removing genuinely dead wood and deadheading the spent flowers in spring by snipping just back to the first fat pair of buds below the old bloom. That is it. Everything else stays, and every year of stems it keeps is a year of size banked. Now, the honest fork, because it flips for the other types. Panicle hydrangeas, the cone-flowered ones like Limelight, and smooth hydrangeas like Annabelle, bloom on new wood, growth they make fresh each spring. Those you can, and often should, prune in late winter, and a hard prune actually drives vigorous new growth. Even then, for maximum size rather than maximum flower count, you prune lightly and leave a taller woody framework for the plant to build on, rather than cutting it to the ground every year. So before you make a single cut, you have to know which of those two situations you are in, and that turns out to be the whole ballgame. Number 2. Protect the buds through winter, because on old wood types, the plant does not lose its size to the cold. It loses it to the wind. This is the other half of the same problem, and it undoes the same kind of gains. Except this time, the plant is not being cut by you. It is being cut by winter, in a way that most people completely misunderstand. And understanding it correctly is what lets you stop it. The instinct is that winter damage is about temperature, that a hard enough freeze kills the stems and buds. That is not usually what is happening. On big leaf and mountain hydrangeas, the flower buds are already formed and sitting on the stems all winter, and the thing that kills them is not the cold number on the thermometer. It is desiccation. Cold, dry winter wind pulls moisture straight out of those exposed buds and dries them to death. And it can do that on a stem that would have survived the temperature perfectly well. So you get a plant that comes through winter with living stems but dead buds, leaves out green and healthy in spring, and produces almost no flowers, and the top growth often dies back anyway, forcing it to rebuild from the base. Which means protecting a hydrangea over winter is really about shelter from wind, not warmth. That reframes the whole job and makes it much simpler. The method growers use is a windbreak or an insulating cage. Drive 3 or 4 sturdy stakes into the ground around the plant, and wrap burlap around the outside to break the wind. For real cold, go further. Make a cage of chicken wire around the whole plant and loosely fill it with dry leaves or straw, which traps an insulating pocket of air around the stems and buds. Either one shelters the buds from the drying wind and carries them through to spring alive, which means the plant keeps its height and flowers on schedule instead of starting over. One material warning, because it is the common mistake that backfires. Never wrap a hydrangea in plastic. Plastic traps moisture against the plant and rots it, and on a sunny winter day, it turns into a little greenhouse that heats the plant up and then lets it freeze hard at night. Use burlap, leaves, or breathable frost cloth, things that shelter without sealing. And watch the far end of winter, because that is where people lose buds after doing everything else right. A warm spell in late winter can trick the plant into breaking dormancy early, swelling its buds, and then a hard freeze afterward destroys them. A false spring. So keep the protection on through the fluctuating late winter weather and take it off gradually as spring genuinely settles, not on the first warm day. Now, a quick word, because everything in this video keeps circling back to one thing you have to know first. Quick one, right here, because you have probably noticed that every single lever in this video keeps running into the same wall. When to prune, whether to prune at all, whether winter protection even matters, how big the plant can ever get. Every one of those has a different answer depending on which of the 6 hydrangeas you own, and if you do not know which you have, you are guessing on all of them at once. That is the single most useful thing you can learn about this plant, and it is worth more than any technique. Because a hydrangea is not one plant. It is 6 different types wearing one name, and they are pruned at different times, protected differently, and have completely different size ceilings. The person whose giant hydrangea you envy is not doing more work than you. They very often just planted a type that gets big and then did not get in its way. So I put the whole thing in one place. It is called the Hydrangea Mastery Guide, and it exists to answer exactly the question every lever in this video depends on. What am I actually growing? It sorts all 6 types in about 90 seconds. It gives you the prune by type calendar, so you never cut off next year's size by mistake. It explains the real reason the color changes, which is not the pH, whatever you were told. And it walks through the 5 myths that cost people an entire season. 29 pages, $27, instant PDF, 7-day money-back guarantee, and the link is in the description at waltgreer.com. It ends the way this channel always does, with the part nobody selling you a miracle will admit. 4 of the 6 types cannot change color no matter what you pour on the soil. Fertilizer will never fix a hydrangea that will not bloom. A guide that only tells you what to do is only half a guide. Now, the lever most people skip entirely because it asks for the one thing gardeners find hardest. Number 3. Let the roots get established and give the plant the 2 or 3 years it needs before you expect a giant. This is the lever most people skip because it asks for patience, and patience is the hardest thing to give a plant. Here is what happens that nobody warns you about. You plant a small hydrangea, and for the first 2 or 3 years it seems to just sit there. It might even die back over winter and push up fresh from the base each spring, staying small, refusing to take off, and it is maddening. Most people conclude they have done something wrong or bought a dud and start throwing feed and interventions at it. Nothing is wrong. The plant is doing exactly what it should. Below the ground, invisibly, it is spending those first years building a root system, and a hydrangea cannot support big top growth until it has the roots to feed and water that growth. Growers put it plainly. It typically takes 2 to 3 years for the roots to establish enough to then drive large growth above ground. The plant is not stalled. It is laying a foundation, and the foundation has to come before the building. The mistake in those early years is impatience, and impatience does real harm. Feeding hard to force growth pushes weak top growth. The young roots cannot support. Fussing and overwatering can rot it. Digging it up and moving it because it is not performing resets the root clock to 0. The single best thing you can do in years 1 to 3 is give the plant a good spot, keep it watered, and otherwise leave it alone to build underground. And there is a direct way you help that root system build, which is the whole of the next point in miniature: how you water. Deep, infrequent soaking drives roots downward, because the water sits lower in the soil and the roots follow it down, building the deep, extensive system that supports a big plant. Frequent shallow watering does the opposite, keeping roots up near the surface where they stay shallow and limited. So watering deeply is not just about drought. It is one of the ways you actively build the engine that a huge hydrangea runs on. The plant that gets big is very often just the plant that was allowed to spend its first few years getting established by someone who did not panic. Number 4. Feed and mulch the right way, and understand why feeding is not the size lever you have been treating it as. This is where everybody starts, and it is fourth on the list for a reason. Feeding a hydrangea helps, but it is support, not the engine. A well-fed plant that gets cut back every autumn is still a small plant. A protected, established plant in decent soil gets big with barely any feeding at all. So feed, but hold it in its proper place, and above all, feed in a way that adds size rather than costing it. The single best thing you can give a hydrangea is compost. A couple of inches of good compost or well-rotted manure spread around the base, ideally in late autumn, breaks down slowly over winter and delivers steady, gentle nutrition into the soil right when the roots want it in spring. It feeds the soil life as well as the plant. It improves the ground's ability to hold water, and it never overwhelms the plant the way a strong synthetic feed can. For most hydrangeas, that annual layer of compost is genuinely all the feeding they need to grow big. If you do use a granular fertilizer, a single balanced application in spring as growth begins is plenty. And here is the timing that protects your size. Stop feeding by around midsummer, and never give a hydrangea a nitrogen feed in late summer or autumn. A late feed pushes soft new growth just as the plant should be hardening off and going dormant, and that tender growth gets killed by the first frost, wasting the plant's energy and, on the cold end, costing you the very stems and buds you have been trying to protect. Late feeding does not build a bigger plant. It sets one back. Mulch is the other half, and it does quiet, continuous work. A layer of mulch over the root zone holds moisture in the soil through summer heat, keeps the roots cooler and more evenly watered, and in winter insulates them against the freeze and thaw. Apply it a few inches deep, spread out wide across the whole root area rather than piled up, and keep it pulled back off the stems themselves, because mulch heaped against the base traps moisture where it can rot the crown. So the feeding lever, done right, is mostly compost and mulch, and good timing. It supports everything else. It does not replace it. Number 5. The honest one. A large part of how huge your hydrangea can ever get was decided before you did anything by which of the 6 types you planted. And no amount of good care turns a small variety into a giant. Everything in the first 4 points assumes your plant has the genetic capacity to get big. Some of them do not, and it is only fair you know that before you spend years chasing a size the plant was never going to reach. There is a ceiling built into the label, and it is real. Here is roughly where the types sit. Panicle hydrangeas, the cone-flowered ones, are the giants of the group. Something like limelight can reach 6 to 8 feet tall and wide and become a genuinely massive shrub, and they are also the toughest and most cold-hardy, which is why they are the safest bet if huge is your goal. Smooth hydrangeas, the Annabelle type, also make big, full plants and have the advantage of flowering reliably on new wood every year regardless of winter. Oak-leaf hydrangeas can get large and structural too. The big-leaf mopheads, the classic blue and pink ones most people picture, are more of a mixed bag because they have been bred into a huge range of sizes. Some older varieties get quite large, but many modern ones, especially the compact and dwarf types bred for small gardens and containers, have a deliberately low size ceiling. A variety bred to stay 3 feet will stay 3 feet, however perfectly you grow it, because that is what it was designed to do. Feeding it, protecting it, and waiting will get it to its best size, and its best size is still small. So if you genuinely want an enormous hydrangea, the most decisive move happens before planting, at the moment you choose the plant. Pick a type and a variety known to get big, a panicle like Limelight, or a large smooth like Annabelle, rather than buying a compact mophead and then fighting its nature for a decade. Check the mature size on the label and believe it. And if you already have a small by design variety, there is no failure in that. It is doing exactly what it was bred to do. The honest move is to grow it beautifully at the size it is, and put a panicle somewhere else if you want the giant. Let me pull all 5 together. Before we finish, send this to one person you know whose hydrangea has been the same size for years, and who is convinced they just cannot grow them. Just the link. There is a very good chance they have been quietly resetting it every autumn, and nobody has ever told them to stop. Here is the whole thing in one idea. A hydrangea gets huge by accumulating, year on year, and staying huge means not losing what it built. The plant already wants to be big. Your job is mostly to stop taking size away from it, so do not cut it back. On the old wood types, the mopheads and mountain hydrangeas, next year's growth and flowers are already on the stems, and tidying them off in autumn deletes years of accumulated framework. Deadhead lightly in spring and leave the rest. Protect the buds through winter, because on those same types the buds are killed by dry wind, not cold. A burlap windbreak or a loose cage of leaves carries them through alive, so the plant keeps its height instead of dying back and starting over. Never wrap it in plastic, and keep the shelter on through the false spring swings of late winter. Give it the 2 or 3 years it needs to establish its roots before you expect a giant, and water deep and infrequent to drive those roots down, because the root system is the engine a big plant runs on. Do not panic in the slow early years. The plant is building underground. Feed it gently, mostly compost and mulch, and never with nitrogen late in the season, because a late feed costs you the very growth you are trying to keep. Feeding supports size, it does not create it. And be honest about the ceiling. If you want an enormous hydrangea, plant a type that gets enormous, a panicle like Limelight or a big smooth like Annabelle, and do not spend a decade fighting a compact variety that was bred to stay small. The most important decision happens at the garden center. Get those right on a plant that can grow, and it compounds. Every year it keeps its structure, protects its buds, extends its roots, and builds on all of it, until the hydrangea spilling over your fence is the one the neighbors are staring at. Subscribe and hit the bell and stick around. We do this the honest way here in the Forgotten Knowledge Library, which means telling you that the biggest gains are free, and telling you the truth about the ceiling, instead of selling you a feed. It is free, and it always will be. And drop a comment telling me how long you have had your hydrangea and how big it is now, because I would like to see who is on year 1 and who has been resetting theirs without knowing it. Next time, another plant that gets better every year if you stop getting in its way. I will see you in the next one.